welcome, Stewie, Winston Stewart,
Good morning.
a hermit of renown. The purpose of this whole endeavor is to memorialize and institutionalize the history of the hermits. You know, we have significant hermits like yourself who have done wonderful things, and we want to be able to archive that information to motivate our mentees, because that is an area that we're moving our thrust in. And this is a venture from the Hermit Foundation. So you are amongst the first. So you came to mind immediately when we thought of this exercise. Just as a little preamble and a little background, we're also trying to engage Miss Little to have her give a perspective from, you know, working with hermits of several generations. Doclet, who is now 60, if you can believe that, you know, we'll be talking to Doclet as well, right? And we're trying to get Colby in there to talk about his dad, you know,
Okay.
and the Barton Clark, the Grub Master, you know, to get his perspective. And I have fired Ali, you know, to talk about him and what he has done regionally. We wanted to encapsulate the regional impact of hermits in this region, right? So, having said all that, how does a youngster like yourself going into KC, you know, I spoke to Burmy, I spoke to GT, and I spoke to Bajove. And that was about 5 hours of my life, you know, to get some background of you. It should have been about half an hour. But once the hermits get talking, you know, we can't stop. As is indicative of this preamble, right?
Well, I'll tell you something. Coming from you, Nuts, I'm truly honored, because, you know, I have a lot of respect for you over these 50 years. Actually, 50 plus years. And to be given this platform certainly is a privilege that I don't take lightly. And I'm not just using cliches. I mean it in all sincerity. So thanks for the invitation.
All right. So, Stewie, tell us something about your family background, how you got here.
Well, I was born at home in Whitfield Town, 7 Nelson Road to be exact. My father was a police officer. And my mom was, I guess you could call her a domestic worker, stay-at-home mom, raising actually 8 kids, 7 of whom are biological. One was adopted, in a small 3-bedroom home at the back of the owner's property. So that is the genesis of my humble beginnings. Ironically, I didn't believe I was poor. But looking back, we were obviously very, very poor. I mean, how can you accommodate 10 individuals in a 3-bedroom humble home and still feel comfortable? So all kudos to my parents for making us feel valued and needed. And I would not trade it for anything, because that is really my reference point whenever I tend to stray in an area which I should not be. I bring myself back to my beginnings and what would I have done back then that I'm not doing now. So even though I was a child, obviously on Nelson Road, no more than 2-3 years old, I still recall some of those happenings. So that, to answer your question, that's my background as such. From there, we moved to Langard Avenue, which is a little bit further uptown. So we're now moving on up, like the Jefferson.
On the east side?
On the east side, yes. So I moved from Whitfield Town Primary to Maxfield Park Primary. And from there, I was fortunate to have gotten a government scholarship to Kingston College at 10 years old, which was a bit young. Obviously, I'm still wet behind the ears, but having 3 older brothers, including the one who was adopted, having preceded me at KC, it was kind of a smooth entree into the Fortis Nation, so to speak. And I guess there I found out in no uncertain terms what it meant to be biblical in terms of caring for your fellow man. As you know, Nuts and Peter, just like George and JC, it's a brotherhood. And if we have one patty and you're breaking the side you have none, you break it in two and give them half. So the fervor that you see Nuts and Peter for KC Old Boys in particular is not that we're cocky or better than anybody. It's just how we were exposed in an environment of, I would say, poverty. You know, we're not endowed with the Alexanders of the world who can underwrite certain things in terms of infrastructure improvement and so on. We didn't have that. But what we had was the numbers. And just like what Obama did in terms of having an army of volunteers and collecting dollars instead of thousands of dollars, that's what we were about at KC, sharing. And I took that teaching in my formative years to my current perspective in life. This is how I am. I seriously cannot walk past a person lying in the gutters and not stop to find out if there's something I can do. And it's not to blow my own trumpet. That's just how we were taught at KC.
That's Stewie, just to make it a little more chronological, you know. All
Yeah.
right, so you entered KC, 1E.
Yes.
All right, you know,
Yes.
yeah, you're one of the 1E. And you have a group, the 65ers. You entered in 1965, right?
Yes.
That is in and of itself significant as well, because, you know, that was pointed out to us. But in asking your peers, these people who have known you for 60 plus years, one, you know, ask them, when I say Winston Stewart, what stands out? And to a man, all of them said leadership. How does a 10 plus year old demonstrate leadership at such a stage? How?
It's funny that they would mention that, because pretty sure
they mention other things too, but we won't go there.
Yeah. Pretty sure it's the same that Georges and JC, but each form is what you call a monitor. When the teacher is not there, then you sit in the teacher's chair, which is on a little platform, so you can actually look at a slight angle down at your peers, and you're supposed to keep order. So I guess even when I was at primary school, I was given responsibilities beyond my years. So I don't know if it's a blessing from God, which probably it is, but it comes natural to me to want to take responsibility. Even at a tender age of 10, I determined that if the teacher is not there, we should not misbehave. I mean, the sign of good character is doing the right thing when nobody is looking. So these are some of the things that I bring to the table, which Berman and others characterize as leadership, which I guess it comes natural. And I actually enjoy taking responsibility for certain things. I'm not a loud and aggressive person, and I guess that kind of helped others to come along for the journey or follow the leader, as I say. And that was pretty much my journey through Kingston College, culminating with being appointed head boy of the school.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to the head boy, because that is another bullet point on my list here. Before we get there, another thing that struck me in this timeline, you know, with social media and, you know, selfies and self-promotion, what struck me is that Stewie's sister, this is to the Hermit Nation at large, was Dulcimina on Elaine Perkins' program. That was a vanguard program, radio program, serialized radio program in Jamaica. And yet a lot of people never knew that. You know, how do you, with a sister in a popular program that everybody is talking about, not herald that when you go to school? What about you precluded that?
I guess the genesis of that is from my father in particular. Brilliant man, probably much brighter than myself proportionally for age. and I never saw him being braggadocious or braggadocio. And I kind of take that cue from him. And also the principal at the time, Mr. Forrest. I said before, I don't like blowing a trumpet. I don't think it's necessary. By your deeds, you shall be judged, according to the good book. So to answer a question about my sister, who I call Jess, that's her initial, Joan Eloise Sonia Stewart. Call her Jess or Jessie. She and another well-known personality in Jamaica were in the drama club at St. Hugh's. And from a tender age, even at home, she was always, posing and doing all kind of different things, talking to herself, reciting things. So we kind of had an idea that she was into that type of arts and drama type pursuits. So it didn't really surprise us as family members or siblings that she would have been given that role as Dulcimina, even while she was still at St. Hugh's. So yes, I could have gone out and told the world that my sister was Dulcimina, but I didn't think it was necessary. We certainly are proud of her, and people who know her, just like I'm talking here, you would think I'm a female version of her, or a male version of her, so to speak. We're all of that persuasion, and especially my eldest sibling. She'll be sitting in the room, I don't know that she's there because she's so quiet. But I guess I could have been a little bit more forceful in saying, by the way, my sister is Dulcimina.
No, so it came up, people discussed the latest episode of Dulcimina, so it would be an easy segue to say, by the way, that's my sister.
Yes. And I've done it a couple of times, usually amongst people from the country, my relatives who might not have known that that's the case. A few times, yes, go down to Guyzil and we'll have that type of discussion. But by the way, Dulcimina is actually a grip.
Yeah, I know we call it the famous Jamaican grip because of Dulcimina,
yes. Yeah.
But, all right, Stewie. So you went to Wani and you were a standout student at Wani because you never went to second form. You moved from the 3G.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
The headmaster at the time decided to run an experiment and decided to what I call skip 38 of us from different first forms into a special form called 3G special. Now picture this. We had third formers at the time who were 14, approaching 15.
Yeah, right.
And here it was.
Shaving. They were shaving, right?
some of them possibly were. And here it is. I'm 11 years old and in third form.
Yeah.
Looking back, that was a hell of a risk the headmaster took, because at that age, as you know, Nuts and Peter, a 2-year difference in children at that age is significant.
Significant, yes.
And you run the risk of getting beaten up or, losing lunch money or whatever it was. And some did get beat up and did lose their lunch money. Fortunately, I had some friends, because my older brothers went there. I had some friends who were like in fifth form or whatever. They used to check in on me every now and again to make sure little Stewie was okay. But going back to the fact I was in 1E, the arrangement at the time, at least this was all the headmaster explained to me years after, was that the children that excelled at the common entrance would go to 1A and they would do French, and their counterparts who did Spanish would go to 1D or 1 Delta. And then the next tier down, based on common entrance results, they would go to 1B and 1C for French and Spanish, respectively. That leaves 1E, 1F, and 1G.
1E for engineering.
Well, that might have been a premonition. But the children in 1E were the youngest of the cohort that came in 1965.
Right.
The 1G boys were the oldest, some were already 13, and a few had mustache and a few strands of beard. So they were quite intimidating, of course, much bigger than me.
Yes,
These
yes,
guys were well over, 5'9" already.
yes,
And 1F was by far the ones who did not perform as well in the
yes.
common entrance. That's how it was explained to me.
Okay, good, good. All right. So, what was your relationship with dogs, dog first?
Well, as I went through the different forms, my relationship with him took on a different meaning in that he eventually saw me literally growing up before his eyes. So I would get quite a lot of responsibilities. As a matter of fact, I taught third and fourth form students when the teachers were absent in maths and physics. And that was his assignment to me, that he wanted me to go and take that particular farm or the next farm next door. So the relationship was more like a father-son relationship with an additional expectation on his part that I would be, taking these positions of leadership in the absence of teachers and so on.
All right. So,
Funny enough, you asked that question because when I came back from Australia, I'm not leapfrogging a bit, but it's all relevant. When I came back from Australia in 1982, so it's long after I left KC, and Mr. Forrest was still tending to his rose garden. So I went around there and saw him, and he called me by my first name.
absolutely.
Imagine that. I mean, he would have encountered thousands of boys in his time,
Yeah.
and yet he was able to remember my first name.
Yeah. Well, because you were a stand-up, and that's why we have you here, sir. That's why you're the first. And I want you now to segue to Don Taylor and
Yeah.
your relationship with it. Let me just establish that I know that it started out fraught, right?
Yes.
But it improved to something very significant. And notwithstanding how it started out, he was the one who made you head boy, right?
Yes.
Which
Yes.
speaks something about his character.
Yes. And I actually knew Dante, as I call him, not before his face, obviously. God, God rest his soul.
Yeah.
But he was the pastor at the church on Malines Road there. So I knew him from before I went to KC. So what happened between me and Don Taylor was that I'm a stickler for justice, by the way. I think nuts know that. Um, he did something which I thought was not something that a headmaster should have done, which was to prejudge two fifth farmers without understanding what the issues were, only to the side of the teacher. And I knew for a fact that those two boys in fifth farm were upstanding students. But for whatever reason, kids are, a couple of their friends sort of did something which was really weird. Each farm has a garbage bin. And of course, paper was inside. And one of his friends lit the garbage bin and placed it near the teacher's chair. And of course, she thought that it was by these two boys and went and complained to Don Taylor, and he took her word for it. So I went to his office and I said, you need to go back and apologize to those two boys. And, he was taken aback by my tone, number one, and the audacity of me coming to his office to tell him what to do. But as fate will have it, he eventually got the true story, and he did call the two boys back to his office and apologize to them. So that was the frosty initiation between myself and Don Taylor. And yes, he was the one that insisted that I be the head boy of the school.
Well, and all right, tell us now. I also understand that when the Gibson Relays became a feature in our athletic, purview, that you played a part in the inauguration of the Gibson Relays. Explain that to us.
Yes, Bishop Gibson, as you know, is a founder of Kingston College, even though people are mistaken saying that Bishop McCarthy is the founder. But the reason being is that Gibson was a young priest at the time. It was his idea to start a school for boys who could not get into the much vaunted Jamaica College and his alma mater, St. George's College. So he decided to set up a school that would cater to these boys who were somewhat rejected because they're from the inner cities. All right? But because he was a priest and Bishop McCarthy was the Bishop of Jamaica at the time, he was given credit for starting Kingston College, and that is factually incorrect. Bishop Gibson is the one that started Kingston College using 80 pounds sterling that he gathered from himself and his sister to purchase lands, which is now the Gleaner Company location. That's where Casey started.
Oh.
So I'm a student of history, even though I'm a scientist, and I studied Bishop Gibson from A to Z. I said, how can we perpetually recognize this person? And being a person of sports himself, a lot of people don't know this, but Bishop Gibson actually was displeased with the Manning Cup team a few years back. Of course, I'm rambling along, but it's all relevant. We'll come together eventually. And the next day in chapel, he dismissed the first 11 and handpicked a second 11 to represent KC.
What?
This was his this was his message to all of us, that he does not tolerate mediocrity, because boys were out there in the stadium, much stronger team than Kingston Tech, and end up losing the game. And he was not pleased. So with all of this in mind, I said, this man is probably the first approximation to a saint. What can we do to perpetuate his name and his legacy? And that's part of my input into why we should have the Gibson Relays.
Wow, I never knew that, Stuart. I absolutely never knew that. I know that you were there in the award ceremony because you were a head boy at the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but that is news to me. And I thought I did my background research. So I'm glad to having had you explain that. So now, we are 20 minutes on an interview and we don't talk Hermitage yet, right?
That's right.
So let's go to Canada. No, let's go to the Hermitage.
Yes.
By the way, when did you decide that you wanted to be an engineer?
I didn't make that decision. Surprisingly, that decision was made for me in Fort Farm by a teacher, a senior master by the name of Mr. John Borrow, who, by the way, was an atheist and also a sadist, in my opinion.
We don't discuss much about John Borrow then.
Yeah, he's a World War II vet, and I was pretty good at math and physics, additional math and physics in Fort Farm. And he came to me one day and said, you will be doing civil engineering, so you better quit your interest in history, geography, and all of those other extraneous stuff, to use his terminology. And I was saddened because I wanted a balanced curriculum, educational curriculum for myself. So I had to relieve myself of, well, I didn't drop history, I dropped geography. And all the way through sixth form, it was always maths, pure maths, applied maths, physics, and chemistry. So he was the one that actually got me interested in civil engineering.
Yeah,
so
well,
I know at that time, when you're that age, you don't dare talk back to a teacher and say, no, you're not going to even consider what he's saying.
So Hermitage now.
So I got to the Hermitage in September 1973 and was immediately grubbed by Barton Clark, who you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
The ignominy, of course, of the whole thing was the fact that I was wearing a pair of Clarks. I know those drains along the corridors. I was told to stand in there because I had the audacity of coming to the Hermitage in a pair of Clarks. And you know the deal, it went on for a whole week. But I eventually saw the purpose of it. It was their way of leveling the playing field, given the different socioeconomic backgrounds of the intake of students. And it worked. It worked. We became brothers, literally and figuratively. And again, I would not trade it for anything.
So How has the Hermitage impacted your life? I mean, give me all the nuts and bolts. I want you also to talk about Nazi just for a bit, because
Yes,
I know it was important to you.
yes, he was. What the Hermitage and St. Augustine taught me is independence, survival, resourcefulness, and a can-do spirit. Not that I didn't have that coming from KC, but this kind of enhanced it. The experience at St. Augustine enhanced that DNA which I already had. And certainly this has followed me through life. We all came to St. Augustine or Trinidad with meager resources. I was one of the lucky ones that actually had a government engineering scholarship that at the time the Jamaica dollar dwarfed that of Trinidad. So I was a rich kid on campus, literally. Didn't make a difference with the girls as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, that was my takeaway from being on campus there. It certainly taught you how to survive away from home. Because remember, all of us were teenagers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
So,
Some of us, myself included, first time you're leaving home, not leaving home to go to another parish in Jamaica, leaving home and leaving Jamaica to go to a foreign country that you have never been to and expect to survive while studying.
yes.
So,
So, what stood out for you academically in St. Augustine?
the fact that we could pack a complete engineering course in 3 years. I learned subsequently that most countries, it take them 4+ years. Some don't even graduate. So that stood out for me because the matter, as we call it, was not insignificant, and it was certainly not easy. But yet, we were able to go through it. So that stood out for me in no uncertain terms, because
Which lecturer stood out for you?
the lecturer that stood out for me personally was Compton Dean. Reason being, he was different to the others who I think maybe through their own fault went to England and brought back wives who were probably not attuned to the culture of Trinidad, and it showed on their husbands who were our lecturers when they come to class the next morning, looking all flustered. That's my take. I just figure on their home front, they weren't quite happy. Compton Dean was the exact opposite. Not only did he have the patience, he was able to stitch together the practical implementation of the theory that he was teaching. So he stood out for me, and he was one of the reasons why to this day I have an interest in water resources engineering.
All right. Outside of your Jamaican cohort, your KC brethren and the other Jamaicans, myself included, what sort of regional connection did you make in St. Augustine?
I made a couple of connections. I don't know if you remember that there was an administrative office on campus.
Yes.
His name escaped me right now, but he was the bursar at the time. And we struck up a friendship because I had to go there to get my, scholarship money, so to speak. And struck up a relationship with him, only to find out that he had some connections through an engineering company in Jamaica called Nelson O'Callaghan out in Montego Bay. You might have heard of them, not since you're from that area, yes. Somewhat. And the other connections I made actually were a couple female agricultural students, one from all the way down in Moruga. She now lives in Canada and is a top administrator at one of the ministries up in Toronto. And there are a few others, not as intense as the two I mentioned earlier, but those connections still remain. I still communicate with them, and especially now since we have the internet, it's a lot easier.
Did you have some Grenadian connection as well?
Well, actually, funny you should mention that. My first spouse is actually from Grenada, She was in Milner Hall at the time. And this is personal, but I can reveal it because doesn't make any difference now. She was also on scholarship from the Grenada government, and
Gary at the time.
Eric Gary at the time, and her father, John Morris, was Minister of Education. So that's another connection I made as well. Mr. Gary and my soon-to-be father-in-law at the time, all in the ministries.
You met Gary? You met Gary himself?
Absolutely, several times. Because her dad, Mr. Morris, was Minister of Education. Every time I went to Grenada, they had these cocktail parties, and I was right there in the center circle with all of them.
Wow. Wow.
Yes. He actually is a bit peculiar. Probably one of the earliest proponents of conspiracy theories. Based on some of the things that he said at the time, which just didn't
UFOs. I remember him that thing about UFOs.
Exactly. So he's a forerunner to all what we're seeing now from a certain party in these United States. So
we're about half an hour in there. No,
yes.
So just talk about Nazi for a little bit. Tell us about your relationship with Nazi and how he has impacted your life, even with his demise.
We were actually in the same first form, sat beside each other. So I've known him from I was 10. And we pretty much followed the same pathway to the discipline that we ended up in, civil engineering. He was also the best man at my second attempt at marriage. So he certainly was always there, and he knew me and knew my inner secrets more than anyone else. Maybe Potter Brown might, run a quick second there, but certainly Nazi was that special.
Potter is on my list for interview as well.
Yeah, he was more like a brother to me than just a friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And God rest his soul. Passed away in 2013, May 28th. I'll never forget it.
How did you find out that he had passed?
I was working in Columbus, Ohio, on a massive dam and reservoir project for the city of Columbus. And I heard he was in Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx. And I don't know it must have been a message from God or something, but that particular day, this was April 14th, I think it was, I decided to drive from Ohio to the Bronx to go look for Nazi.
Wow.
A trip that would normally take maybe 7+ hours took me 14 hours because there was driving rain from start to finish. But I was determined to go and do that. And funny enough, he said, when I entered his room on the 8th floor, he said something to me which he had never said before. He said, "Stewart, come here, man. Come give me a hug." And after I drove back to Columbus, Ohio, I said to myself, was he sending me a message? And sure enough, Memorial Day, he had to go on a life support system. So yes, in fact, he was telling me quietly that he'd never see me again. And Nuts and Peter, that broke my heart.
Yes. My more Nazi story too, but time won't allow me to share it. But Nazi was a MFS man like myself, He was on yes. All right, so let's move to your postgrad now. How did this Whitfield Town young poor boy 3-bedroom with 10 people in the house? How did you end up to be this geotechnical engineer building dams in Columbus, Ohio, and tunnels in Amsterdam and all these good stuff?
When I finished my undergraduate degree in Trinidad, it was a general civil engineering degree. And I went back to Jamaica for a year, worked at the Ministry of Works for a year. And there was a Commonwealth scholarship being advertised So I applied for it, and I had to appear before a panel at the Ministry of Education. And a couple of the panelists were quite rude, actually. One in particular wanted to know why I wanted to go back to school after having worked just under a year. And I said to myself, how should I answer this question without pissing off anybody? Excuse my language, but I shouldn't say that. So I told her, I said, I'm sick and tired of seeing expatriate engineers coming to Jamaica and taking positions that we as Jamaicans should rightfully be occupying. Those positions should be for Jamaicans. Anyone that come after should be secondary. And there was a dreadlocks lecturer who was part of the panel, and I saw him, nod his head.
Right.
And I knew at that point in time I was going to get the scholarship.
Well, the dready control the purse.
Yeah, well, he was the chairman of the panel.
Oh, you were the chairman.
So I got the Conrail scholarship. Now, why geotech engineering? Because I like to diagnose things, and the doctors who diagnose a person who dies, to me, is probably the zenith of the medical fraternity or industry. The pathologists of engineers, civil engineers, are in fact geotech engineers. What do I mean by that? We are expected to design, investigate, explore environments which we cannot see. The buildings that you guys are in, speaking from, are supported by foundations. Without the foundation, there will be no structure standing up there. We go to all of these different cities, we see the skyscrapers. They're all supported on sophisticated foundation system. And those foundation systems are all part and parcel of geotech engineering. Dams and reservoirs, the same thing. Infrastructure works, all geotech engineering. So that piqued my interest, and that's how I became a civil and geotech engineer.
All right. So how was your stay down under? How was the reception and all?
It was funny you should ask a question, which is a very good question. Australians are overtly racist. It's not like the US where it's latent and hidden, except in recent times when it has come out in full force. But when I was down there in 1977, it was quite evident. They did not like people who were not white. But once they heard...
Like an Aboriginal, so maybe that's right.
Yeah. When they heard my accent and realized that I was from Jamaica and the West Indies in particular, they were able to make a connection between myself and West Indies cricket. And it also helped that I was able to discuss with them some of the team members, including my former classmate, Mikey Holden. So that was pretty much us as Caribbean students, our passage into mainstream Australia. But still they look at us with a jaundiced view sometimes, especially those who are completely
How long were you there?
I was there for almost 5 years because my first wife at the time did veterinary medicine, which is a 5-year course. So once I finished my master's, I worked for almost 3.5 years there.
Okay. So Marco Breckenridge, were you close to him when you were there?
He was not there when I was there. Marco came to Australia long after I had gone back to the Caribbean.
Okay.
Because I left Australia in April 1982.
Okay. So give me some of your significant geotech projects now that you have accomplished, some of your accomplishments.
My signature project in these United States is undoubtedly the Merrill Creek Reservoir Project, which is out there in northwestern New Jersey. It is such a huge facility that it actually is on the map of New Jersey. That occupies 650 acres and 15 billion gallons of impoundment. The main dam is over 330 feet high, and it has 3 additional dikes, which are much shorter, 85 to 100 feet, that basically filled in the topography, which was like valleys and ridges, to create this nice, neat finish around the rim of the reservoir itself. That had challenges unimaginable. Biggest one being that the site literally sat on a fault zone. It's all karstic, meaning limestone deposits, which are subjected to different type of degradation, joints, partings, openings, you name it. So before anything was built, before the embankment was built, we had to treat the rock foundation. And we did everything imaginable, from dental concrete, just like it sounds. We literally use a needle to pump grout into the openings, the cracks in the foundation. And then we cleaned it completely. In fact, we were so thorough that the contractor became very, very frustrated with us and said, the only thing that we have not done yet is use a toothbrush to clean the rock. But that facility still stands. It was built, completed in 1988. I went back in 2018 for the 30th anniversary and was given a citation by the governor of New Jersey at the time. And that facility is still.
What's the governor?
What's that?
What's the governor?
Krista Whitman at the time.
Oh, Krista Whitman. Oh,
yes,
she went on to become the EPA.
Yes, exactly. The same person. So that facility is still there. I had a couple smaller dams also in New Jersey, but by far that one I just mentioned was the signature project. The other feature of that facility is that it has what's called an inlet outlet tower. So imagine you have this tower sticking up in the air, and at each interval, each 10-foot interval, you have portholes where you can fill the reservoir if it's running low, or you can release water through the port by gravity down to the Delaware River. So connecting the inlet outlet tower is a 1,400-foot tunnel, which again was a significant challenge because it's in these different fault zones. So we had to treat the rock surface completely around. We had steel sets, we had grout, we have every imaginable treatment possible to maintain the integrity of that 1,400-foot tunnel. So 3 6-foot diameter pipes are in that tunnel. And once you get to the mouth of the tunnel, they go underground for 2.5 miles to the Delaware River, where they're connected to a huge pump station. So when the river, and this is all part of managing the Delaware River, when the river is running high, the pumps are turned on to store some of that water in the reservoir. When the river is running low, the reverse happens. By gravity field, the water comes back from the reservoir into the river to maintain a nominal flow and prevent what we call backwater intrusion, saltwater intrusion at the mouth of a river. Why is that important? If you get saltwater coming upstream in the river, it will kill mangrove and all of those environmental devastation you see from time to time. So it's a managed facility, and it's owned by a conglomerate of public utilities, including Public Service, Electric and Gas, Delmarva, and others that operate on the banks of the Delaware River. So there's always water available to run through their cooling towers. Whereas before that facility was built, it was feast and famine. When the river is dry, nothing goes on with those facilities.
Absolutely. No.
Yes.
And I can see how energized you get.
Yes, I get a high from that. Actually, my adrenaline right now is still rushing.
No. I can hear the pride.
So I was also fortunate to have worked in Denmark, in Copenhagen, because after I left the company that I was working with in New Jersey, I got the opportunity to be president of a small company in California called Ben C. Gerwick Incorporated. Ben Gerwick was a professor at University of California, but he was a contractor by training. So he would innovate a lot of things to fit the problem at the time to get the right solutions. Anyway, long story short, I got involved with a major project in Copenhagen, which involves an ITT, which is an immersed tube tunnel. So when you drive through, like for instance, the tunnel that links New Jersey to New York, Lincoln Tunnel, or the Holland Tunnel, those are all immersed tubes. So what it is, you have to find a way to bury these tunnels. So you can imagine the challenge you have there. You have this high column of water. You have to get these tubes down below the surface, and you have to maintain the integrity in terms of alignment on the entrance side and the exit. So my responsibility there was to do the subsurface exploration, and we had to get a platform out in the open sea, so to speak, and drill all the way down to we found where rock was located. Now imagine you have tides, you have all kind of wave action and everything, and you have to stabilize everything out there. So it took us quite a while, but we got it done. We were able to characterize the subsurface conditions. We made recommendations as to the depth of the immersed tube tunnel, and it was a great success.
You know, Stewie, as you were talking, one of the, you know, I'm a from on the VH, you know, I like my history, right? And
Yes.
I read a lot and follow a lot. And one of the great engineering projects of the 19th century was the Brooklyn Bridge, right?
Yes, yes.
And they drilled down to bedrock, you know, and all that. And they encountered issues that they never know what it was or how to deal with, like the bends, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they went down in casements and all that, and
Yes.
nitrogen was dissolving in the bloodstream, and they got it. In fact, the Washington Roebling was incapacitated, and the project was finished by his wife. You know, but that's another story. You know.
Yeah, that's a real phenomenon, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So you do understand the challenges that we would have
Oh,
encountered out there.
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
So Stewie, you know,
Yes.
just to wind up now, I
Uh-huh.
want to get a little bit into your connection with sports and with the KC Old Boy, and I want to give you a big up because one of the things that project with the bricks and the laying of the bricks as a fundraising effort, and I was told that on your brick you have 1965 to eternity.
Yes.
right. Well,
And there's a reason for that. Again, I'm not showing off, but anything that I have become currently, the genesis of that goes right back to those teachers and that little school on North Street. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as God has granted me his mercy to survive and to live, there will not be a disconnection between myself and that school. So that's the reason why I put 1965 to infinity, as opposed to a finite period like 1965 to 71 or whatever it is that most boys, in fact, everyone else have a finite period when they're at KC. And I mean, to each his own. I just think my connection to the
sport.
sport.
Have a whole different meaning.
Yes. so yeah, I know exactly what Nuts is saying. So that's the reason why my paver is like that.
Yes. Well, and your connection with sports now, like soccer and track and field. I know you're a real lover of sports, and you maintain your connections with especially the KC students who are participating.
Yes, I do. And my only request of them is that they don't be unidirectional. You have to be balanced. The whole purpose of KC, as envisioned by Bishop Gibson, was to graduate well-rounded students, not bookworms and not sports fanatics, but a combination of the two. So when I came back from Australia in 1982, it was a time when everything was in short supply, if you guys might remember. In fact, I went to the Ministry of Education to say I'm now back in the country and I'm ready to give back to the people of Jamaica. The permanent secretary's assistant looked at me and said, well, we don't have any record of you having left the country or even having a scholarship. Reason being, the government had changed. Now, I'm not sure why we have this polarization in Jamaica, but the government changed. The JLP was now in power. Nothing against them. But for whatever reason, my records were nowhere to be found, and it told me I was free to go. And of course, I was saddened by that because I had every intention of giving back to Jamaica. I said before, my parents are poor, never paid a cent from high school all the way to college, not a dime. So I figured somebody must have foot that bill. And it is the people of Jamaica, by through their taxes, that afforded me the opportunity of going to higher education, tertiary education, and graduate school. So I'm back in Jamaica. I'm here to serve. I'm here to give back to my people.
Stuart, as you said that, I participated, I gave a keynote address on the 75th anniversary of the university. And I tapped into that very thought. And
yes.
you and me, we got 2 bites of the cherry, because we got the first bite from Norman Manley's grant-aided,
Yes.
to go to secondary education.
Yes.
And then when his son, Michael, took over and said, education will be free, we got another bite, right?
Yes.
We got another bite, boarding grants and all that. So, we got these 2 bites from a region and a country that is poor.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
This is what this is all about too. What we are doing with the Hermit Foundation is, yes, a lot of us have had to, ply our skills in more developed markets, right? But we still have that yearning to give back, right? And I want you to finish up now, because we've gone far. I want you to finish up now by looking ahead, looking into the future, and
before I
can participate.
Before I look into the future, I have to make those dots connected. So I was not able to give back physically on the ground in Jamaica, and I went to Brooklyn in 1982, 26th of July. And I said to myself, if I cannot give back to my homeland in person, I'm going to do it outside of the country. And one way I found I could do that was by giving back to my alma mater. I've never announced it before, but I have several students that I provide support for. I don't like to talk about it because I'm doing it voluntarily. So that's how I became involved with the Casey Old Boys Association in New York, in Atlanta, and now in Tampa, because that is my vehicle for giving back to education in Jamaica. As to the future, I think it's up to us, Nuts and Peter, to continue to be the mentors of those who are coming behind us. We have had the privilege of significant experience and privileges in our professions. So we would be selfish, in my opinion, if we did not look back at those coming behind us and present ourselves as examples of what they can become, because we're living examples. We sat in the same lecture rooms as they did, are doing rather, in St. Augustine. So they should be able to see a future for themselves, but they're going to need help. Not necessarily in terms of financial, which of course is needed, financial assistance, but certainly in terms of being father figures. A lot of these students, not just from Jamaica, but all over the Caribbean, are coming from backgrounds where things are not necessarily as pristine as they could be, and they need our help. And I'm willing to travel, if necessary, to St. Augustine or wherever, to provide some perspectives on life experiences, because that's what we have and they don't.
Well, we are recording that promise, sir, and you will be called upon to assist, because you have something, you have a wherewithal to assist and to help to guide not only Jamaicans but regionally. Because
absolutely,
I was thinking that when CR, the concept of CR as a dormitory for tertiary students, when that was decided, that was during the West Indies Federation days, right?
Correct.
By its completion in 1963, the West Indies Federation was history, right? That had dropped off. So Canada Hall got the name because it was a donation from the government of Canada to the region. It wasn't to Jamaica, it wasn't to Trinidad, it was to the region, right?
Correct.
And we are institutionalizing this memory. And we want to play a significant part in the growth of our region, you know. So one of your KC alma mater, younger than you, referred to himself as icon, right? So, but you are the true icon, sir. You know. Well, Stewie, it has been a pleasure speaking to you. And we have just scratched the surface, because we know this could have superseded mine and Baijo's conversation, which lasted 2 hours. Quite easily, because you have a lot to say, but we just have to have the time. But I think as we move through your history, it is obvious your contribution, and we thank you, sir.
And I thank you and thank Peter for even considering me as being worthy of this interview. I certainly enjoyed it. I certainly, it brought back many memories, pleasant memories of my profession, which I'm obviously in the swan song year where I step aside. But I've been told I still have a lot to contribute, especially from the Corps of Engineers in the Jacksonville district. So I'm still, actively engaged in helping out with some of these.
And I will touch on your vegetarianism and all that, but that's another.
We'll talk about that another time.
Yes, all right. All right, Stu, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Nuts. Thanks, Peter. Nice meeting you virtually. Hope to meet you in person one of these days.